Welcome back. Earlier this week in Unsolved, we told you about a group of retired and active law enforcement in the state who volunteer to help solve crime, known as the Carolinas Cold Case Coalition. That story first aired in 2019. At the time, investigators gave us an example of one way they can help law enforcement agencies. Take a look.
Last February, we had the city of Nags Head come to us, and they needed some DNA testing, some funding for DNA testing. And so we were able to come up with some funding to help them do some testing on a very horrendous case where a young baby was abandoned and was killed and abandoned.
Now, 2 years later, DNA has led police to 54-year-old Scott Poole and his wife, 51-year-old Robin Byram. They're charged with concealing the birth of a child whose remains were found in the trash in 1991. The Cold Case Coalition is very clear that they do not take credit for solving this case, and that the hard work was done over many years by the Nags Head Police Department and other agencies. Tonight, we're getting more details from the Nags Head Police Chief and Forensics Lab on the breakthrough discovery in the 30-year-old case. Zach Dahlheimer has the story.
It's pretty sad.
Nags Head Police Chief Phil Webster has been in law enforcement for about 30 years. Roughly the same amount of time folks have been looking for answers in one case gone cold.
When I became the chief of this department, I basically feel as though I own everything personally.
Until now.
We went back to sort of the beginning.
Back to April 4th, 1991, when a town sanitation worker found a baby boy's remains in a trash can rack.
Chief Webster says it was this area here on East Tides Drive where the baby's remains were found 30 years ago. This is what the area looks like now, but this is what it looked like back in April of 1991.
After decades of chasing leads, investigators chose to send a rib bone from the remains here.
It's always rewarding in the end to be able to give them an answer.
David Middleman is the CEO of Othram, a private genetic testing lab in Texas, using state-of-the-art methods to extract DNA and build leads for investigators.
And we take this evidence that's for one reason or another been intractable and unusable, and we pull useful information from that crime scene DNA evidence.
Middleman's lab was able to pull DNA from the rib bone to conduct a genealogical profile.
We use a process called forensic grade genome sequencing. We then take that DNA that is prepared and we put it through a process in which we can read out a bunch of DNA letters. And we can look for people that share lots of markers in common with the unknown, and that becomes a match to a distant relative. We can look for people, for example, in public databases that have consented or agreed to participate in these kind of investigations to help people close out a cold case. Investigators, they were able to do their work, later on use their own tools to confirm the work we did and establish confirmatory evidence that the people they identified were in fact the parents of this child.
Those parents, Scott Poole and Robin Byram, arrested last week, each being charged with concealing the birth of a child. Police say both were living in the area at the time, and it's believed the boy was dead for about 2 months before being placed near the trash. As this investigation continues, both Middleman and Webster believe this type of testing will become more mainstream, leading to cold cases getting quicker results.
But there is a huge backlog, a silent mass disaster of cases that just cannot get solved using traditional methods. And so it's our hope that Othram will bring answers to as many of those cases as possible.
Wow. Chief Webster specifically expressed gratitude to former Nags Head Police Chief Kevin Brinkley for previous work on the case. Several other agencies assisted with the investigation, including the NC State Bureau of Investigation.